Welcome to Grow Money Business, the podcast dedicated to helping business owners optimize income, pay less in tax, and invest prudently. Here's your host, Grant Bledsoe.
Hello, everybody. Grant Bledsoe here. Welcome back to Grow Money Business. This week on the show, my guest is Karl Dakin of Dakin Capital. Karl is a longtime expert in capital raising for small companies. For years and years and years and years, the way that businesses would grow would be to go to the bank and ask for a loan and get the money and then use that to grow and then pay back the loan with interest. And then once you grow to a sufficient size, you might want to raise equity capital by taking your company public. You hire an investment bank and then run down to the stock exchange and ring the ceremonial bell on the first day of trading and go off on your merry way. Well, over the last couple decades, there have been a lot of advancements in the ways that companies can raise capital. There are crowdfunding opportunities now. You can market private offerings to accredited or wealthy investors. You can sell equity directly to family offices or venture capital funds or private equity. There are a million ways to raise money for growth. And this is something that Karl specializes in and has for a very long time. He was an attorney by trade and then was in the right place at the right time as a software company he was working at needed to raise funds. And then he went off down the road of his career. And now, hundreds of transactions later, he has a huge depth of knowledge in how companies can raise money for their own operations. So he joins us today to walk us through all the dynamics, what's going on today in the current interest rate environment. He discusses some of the major pitfalls that entrepreneurs run into when they're raising capital, a few things to avoid, and he was just generally a delight to speak with. I hope you enjoy the interview as much as I did. Hey everyone, I need to interject quickly to remind you all that nothing found in today's episode or any other episode of Grow Money Business should be considered financial, investing, legal, tax, fitness, or even relationship advice. It's content that you're free to use and to deploy on your own terms. And before taking any actions on content found on the show, please do consult with your tax professional, your attorney, or your financial planner. If you don't have a financial planner, head on over to threeoakswealth.com to learn more about what we do in terms of financial planning and investments and how we help clients on an ongoing basis. Welcome, Karl. Thank you for joining us today. We were just chit-chatting here a minute or two ago. We've done a couple hundred episodes of this podcast, and I don't think we've ever talked about capital raising from an entrepreneur's perspective. And I'm really happy to cover that with an expert like yourself. Could we start with you maybe telling us a little bit about yourself and your firm and your background in capital formation, capital raising?
Sure. So my name is Karl Dakin, and I have my own company, Dakin Capital, which is sometimes viewed as another indication of I don't play well with others or whatever. But I got into startup businesses, entrepreneurship with my family, which owned a Chevrolet dealership, farm implement dealership in eastern Kansas. And my joke is I started my first business when I was 7 years old because they drugged me into the local town to see if I had any musical talent. And it turned out I did not. But in the course of doing that, I also found that I could buy candy at retail and haul it out to the rural schoolhouse where I was attending and sell it at a markup. And that worked pretty good for several weeks before some parents started to complain and I had to shut my business down. I moved out to Denver here 44 years ago, and I had a relative who was launching a brand new business in software engineering. Before that was a term of art. And he asked me if I could help him make it into a real business. And we succeeded by getting it grown and sold off. And ever since then, I've been in the business of helping start businesses. And along that path, when they draw the short straw and says, who's going to raise capital? And I tended to pick that short straw. And so I've been involved in hundreds of capital campaigns in multiple industries. And I've developed my own approaches to raising capital, which I think are better than what is commonly taught or what you might see on TV.
Interesting. So in what capacity have you been along for the ride in these hundreds of businesses? As an employee, as an owner, as an advisor, how does that work?
Every label you can think of, I've tried at least once. So, yes, advisor, consultant, lawyer, mentor, investor, teacher, instructor, um, complainer, whiner, all the above.
Did you work in the legal industry for a while before taking on this path? So what is, tell us more about your legal background.
Yeah, so I got my law degree and moved to Denver. And at that time, I didn't have a specific job in place. So that's when I started working with this software engineering firm. And it ended up that my knowledge of computers was right time, right place for the computer revolution. I was one of the few lawyers who could speak computer and law at the same time, which made me a sudden overnight expert without a lot of experience. And from there, I did 20 years where I was primarily wearing my lawyer hat, working with startups, incorporation, intellectual property, some disputes. I got into a major commercial espionage case that is a great 8-year story whenever you have the time. And after 20 years, I decided that rather than coaching and mentoring from the back seat of the car, I'd rather drive the car myself. And so from that point forward, I've been involved in projects where I typically either am the CEO or I'm on the C-suite team helping out. But I continue also to advise and consult purely from a expert role for those businesses who need some help along the way.
Very cool. Very cool. So I think a lot of our listeners probably envision raising capital in a way that's very similar to what they see on TV, where you have some kind of business idea and you knock on a bunch of doors and none of them ever open for you, and then you finally get that one great meeting with a big venture firm or private equity firm. And, after being told no thousands of times, you finally get a yes, and then you get this big investor to inject some cash into your company. What is it actually like for businesses that are trying to raise money from investors?
Well, actually, the scenario you described is all too true, all too often. If you see the statistics on the probability of a wealthy individual investing in a small business, it's less than 2% of the pitches actually result in some kind of an investment. And if you start reaching into the private equity offerings, family offices, VC, those stats get worse, not better, because they all have choices of who they can invest in, and they can cherry pick as much as they want to in looking at all the businesses competing for their dollars. So it ends up, and the biggest common error in raising capital is knocking on the wrong door. If you're talking to someone who's never going to invest, it might be an interesting conversation, but if it doesn't put money in your pocket, you're not achieving your capital goals. And most of my work, particularly over the last several years, has been advancing what I call my motivated money method, which is trying to identify those people who are most likely to invest and the causes and reasons for them, how you craft offers to match up with them so that the small business spends the least amount of time, the least amount of money in raising capital, and also at the same time improves substantially their probability of success.
Right. Yeah, make sure that it makes sense to me that you would want to handicap the potential universe of investors in a way that puts you in front of the right people at the right time. The obvious question is, how do you do that? What factors are you looking for?
What we look for is somebody who's going to benefit from the success of your business without making an investment. So this includes pretty much anybody who may be in your supply chain, either a supplier or a vendor, where if you succeed, you grow, they're going to sell you more products or services. And similarly, downstream, if you have somebody that's reselling your product or retailing it, then they benefit because they're going to have greater sales as your product is more widely accepted into the marketplace. It also includes your customers, which is particularly good if you're a small business and you are not making enough profit margin to gain the attention of someone who's investing strictly for a return on that investment. And, uh, and then we get into harder to determine, more art form things, but any government agency that collects taxes from you really wants you to pay more taxes. You may find a social cause where your existence is advancing their mission. You may find a community that wants you to come there to create new jobs and contribute to the community. So these people all have a reason, self-interest, for you to succeed. And so if they are asked to fund you, they actually get a twofer out of it. They get the return on investment plus whatever other benefit they get from your success.
Very cool. Interesting. Okay. So how do you get meetings with the stakeholders? Smile and dial, pick up the phone and call your contacts. What are some best practices here?
Well, if you're in business for a while, it gets pretty easy. You just take out your QuickBook report or your checkbook and see who you wrote a check to over the last year. And every one of them is a stakeholder. Anyone who's buying anything from you is a stakeholder. Once you get out of those two groups, then it gets a little harder, but it actually, again, anyone you're writing checks to wants you to continue writing checks. So that seems to be pretty easy. Aligning with social causes, with different types of foundations, other things like that requires a little more thinking and planning. But once you kind of develop it as a skill set, it isn't that hard to say, well, yeah, there's a natural affinity here. There's a reason for them. I may have to go educate them. I may have to call them and go, oh, by the way, you may not know this, but I'm your new best friend because I'm going to help you by succeeding in my business. And somewhere along the way, you point out that their resources in your hands will make you a better friend and a better help than you would have been without it.
Right. So what kind of deal structure do you typically recommend? I mean, are we talking about straight direct equity investment? Are there debt deals that you're that should be a consideration to entrepreneurs? There are a lot of ways to structure these kinds of deals. What do you see most typically?
Most typically, what is commonly offered is equity ownership, something that allows a person to share in the profits of the company somewhere down the road. But from the small business standpoint, that may not be the best for the business. They may benefit from doing something different that either does not give up ownership or doesn't give up voting rights within that ownership, so that the small business can assure that they're going to stay in control for the longest period of time. We have seen a trend that is moving more towards revenue share, where you pay a percentage of the revenue that comes in the door. So it's off the top line instead of the bottom line. And this has a number of attractions to investors because they may get their money immediately. The next quarter calculation may reveal revenue and they get a split of that like a royalty. Where if they invested only in the profit and losses of the company and the company is doing good, it may not see true profits for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road because all those profits are being plowed back into the company. And from the business standpoint, it's a good thing because it's tied to revenue. So it's not like a loan or debt instrument where you've got an automatic obligation without necessarily cash flow to match that. And you can tune your rev share to be pretty much anything you want to be. So you can put in a stair step that says once your investor candidate has gotten so much money back, then we're going to reduce the participation and keep it in tune with the true value of the money you've received instead of giving somebody an unanticipated windfall for their investment.
Sure. Yeah, it seems like that would be the most logical and beneficial way to structure it from the perspective of the entrepreneur, particularly because now there are a lot more places to find capital than there probably were 15, 20, 25 years ago, right? I mean, the numbers of private companies that have gone public are way, way, way down. And what everybody's always told me about that is that you don't have to go public and deal with all these compliance requirements in order to raise the money that you need. And if that's the case, then you have some more leverage in that kind of transaction. You don't have to take whatever deal just comes across your plate. And I could see why some kind of revenue split would be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, and it can be tailored so that if there is an acquisition of your company, it can wrap itself up. You can have formulas built into the contract that convert the rev share into an appropriate level of equity so everybody knows what they're going to get when there's a payday.
Right, right. You touched on something a minute ago that I'd like to dive into as well, and that's retaining a control of the organization. And it seems like every time a company goes through this evolution and brings on capital, you have to give up chunks of that control along the way in most circumstances. And at some point, you're often forced out of your organization, which is not ideal from the perspective of the person raising the capital in the first place. Outside of some revenue sharing agreement, what other ways can entrepreneurs guard against that possibility?
Yeah, the rev share protects the ownership because they're not gaining any true ownership. It is more like a royalty. Whereas if you look at some equity deals, whether it's a membership in an LLC or shares in a corporation, one of your options is to limit or restrict voting rights. So by doing that, then you have, I'll call, control the company. You may not have all the percentage ownership you're looking for, but it keeps people out of your looking over your shoulder at the wrong time and telling you how to run your business that you don't want them to. Now, the more professional the money that you obtain if you go to a private equity firm or VC, they're going to dictate their terms and conditions, which will include voting rights and maybe somebody on your board and things like that, which makes them less desirable from an investment standpoint. And it then depends upon what your strategy is in the short term, how long you want to hang in there. If you're just a jockey who's writing the business until it's sold to someone else, that may not be a problem at all. If this is your lifestyle business or this is your long-term dream of what you want to do as a business, then those sources of capital may not be the best choice for you to choose from.
Right, right. And there's that age-old conflict of interest where the venture capital firm has a lot of money invested across a whole bunch of different companies, and they know that a lot of them are not going to make it. And so when you take money from the venture capital firm, they want you to go 100x. They don't want you to go 5x or 10x because that doesn't move a needle for them based on the denominator and the amount of money that they have invested on behalf of their investors. So they push you to take a whole lot of risk that you might not otherwise want to take in order to go 100x. And it should be a primary consideration when signing the deal with a professional investor, as opposed to, maybe your vendor or your supplier or something like that.
Yeah, your vendor supplier is much more in alignment with who you are and what you're doing. And particularly these days, and by these days, I mean since the beginning of last year, when the Fed started jacking the interest rates, it's caused a complete change in the design structure reaction of the capital industry. We've seen all kinds of people pulling back, making less investments, more conservative investments, and there's less and less money becoming available to invest in businesses. And when that happens, those people who are investing with full discretion, such as an angel investor, they don't have to invest right now. They can sit this out and wait till everything gets more stable. If you're a private equity or VC, you have to invest other people's money, but you don't have to reduce your investment standards. You can raise the bar and make it almost impossible to get money from them. But your strategic investors, people within your supply chain, they're just like you. They need to keep moving, hustling in order to get to their objective. So for them, there's still options for you to work with them, even in the worst of times.
Yeah, yeah. And that's something that I wanted to ask you about as well. So there's, with interest rates going up as quickly as they have because of the inflationary environment and what the Federal Reserve has done, there's always this competition between different asset classes when it comes to pools of investors' money. And, you and I might have our own retirement accounts. We can choose between buying Tesla stock or U.S. government bonds is through the more traditional markets. But institutional investors are making the same distinction and same choices. And when interest rates are higher and you get more in yield on a bond holding, now all of a sudden these more risk-laden opportunities like private companies and public equities are not quite as compelling and as attractive. So hearing you say that angel investors and private equity investors can simply raise their standards to where they're not forced to dole out, funds at unopportunistic in times where they otherwise don't want to, is interesting. Are they able to just sit on the cash in that environment? How does that work from their perspective?
If it's a wealthy individual, they have complete discretion to do nothing. It's called keeping your powder dry is the phrase that they use. And it kind of makes sense. They're asking themselves, can I put money into this venture with an unknown degree of risk and hope that it doesn't go down in value? Same question they can ask themselves if they're going to buy a stock in the stock market when somebody like Jamie Dimon is predicting an 8% haircut next year. Why would I put my money into anything if I'm going to automatically get an 8% loss in it? I would be better to sit idle, do nothing. And with the current high interest rates, which we haven't seen in a long time, you can get 5% or under better conditions, a higher surplus or premium rate that's insured. So when that happens, they're taking their money out of the small business investment pool and they're putting it into the banking pool, which will not get back to the small business pool because banks are not allowed to take risk when they loan money out to their clients. So it completely changes the profile of that type of money, takes it out of the marketplace, which is what we're experiencing right now. Now, if it's a private equity firm, they've got to put the money to work, but they have to do it carefully.
Got it. Okay. So where do bank loans fit into all this? Small business loans, those types of those are attractive opportunities for a lot of people. My understanding is that when you go to a bank and you ask for a loan, if you check some boxes and abide by the SBA financing rules, then the bank is able to use the subsidized system through the SBA backed loans, 7A loans or whatever, and they're more willing to write the loan and underwrite your endeavor in the first place. Why not go to them first then as opposed to giving up equity?
In many cases, that would be the right choice. When you're raising capital, one of your objectives is the lowest price of money you can get. It doesn't make any sense to give up a quarter of your company worth potentially millions of dollars for a $500,000 investment if you can go down to the bank and get the same money, even at a high interest rate of 8%. Those two don't correlate, but all too often, you'll see people who will skip over bank loans because of the concern of having to make regular payments back to the bank. And that's aside from qualification, which we'll get into in a moment. But they think that equity, it's other people's money. Sometimes they don't respect the money as much as they should. But it seems safer because they only have to pay it back if there's a profit. So they kind of default into the thinking that equity is better. But if you do a really hard analysis on your cash flow projections and future value of your company, you may find out that money is prohibitively expensive when compared to debt financing, and you need to be making that as a strategic choice.
Right. The key is having confidence in your own company and coming up with some kind of accurate forecast, which is fleeting at best for a lot of early stage companies.
Yeah, and there's quite a high probability you may get turned down, particularly if you're a startup or a startup with technology. When you go into the bank, they're mandated by federal law and regulation to protect their depositors by taking no risk. And if they look at you and they think you're too new to be proven enough, you're at risk. if you happen to have a product that's highly disruptive, but no one on the loan committee understands what you're talking about, you're viewed to be at risk. And so there are several factors that may still get you kicked out of the bank, even where the SBA or another government agency or even a private program or foundation, and sometimes we're looking at some new community funds, may step in and they may either help guarantee or they may help leverage that bank loan to get you qualified. But you have to understand that there's still a limits on what a bank can and will do. And if you're a brand new company, I would bet against you getting funding.
So if you're going to sell equity in the company, what are the legal requirements for this? How do you design this? What can you do yourself? What do you need to have an attorney do for you? Do regulatory authorities get involved in this? What does that landscape look like?
Basically, any entrepreneur can do it all themselves, and then it becomes a question of whether this is best use of their time, whether or not what they learn is good enough to meet all the regulations that are out there, whether there are other options that maybe they should look at. So anytime you sell a security, there's going to be at least a state agency, if not also the SEC federal agency involved in assuring that the investor is being protected as a consumer in that investment. Then depending upon which type of raise you do, whether it's targeted to wealthy individuals or it's pointed to non-wealthy individuals, there will be more rules and regs that you have to conform to. So I'm a big advocate for crowdfunding that opened up the capital markets to non-wealthy individuals. But there's a reason when you go to that market, you need to recognize that these people are not wealthy. They make their investment decisions differently. They may be using the household budget rather than a discretionary budget to make their investments. So I tend to design campaigns in that regard to customers of the company where I want to position the deal to be more market oriented, generating new customers while at the same time raising capital. But I put the capital to the back or to the side and focus on making a deal with products and discounts and other things that can attract somebody to the table within a budget that they have.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So if you're designing a campaign, I participated in one of these recently. As a matter of fact, it's through the platform we're using right now, Zencastr. So Zencastr has been a good tool for this podcast for a number of years. They have a nice interface. The audio files are pretty easy to deal with. And they wanted to raise some money here. It's probably been a year or so ago. And so I don't think I get any kind of discount on my subscription to the tool. Unfortunately, I'll have to complain about that. But I did give them $100 just to go through the process and see what it's like from this side of the table. And they were successful in raising, I don't know, $5 or $10 million across their customer base. And they don't have a whole lot of obligation to report back to us what's going on. They have, but they basically have carte blanche to do whatever they want with the money. So back to your legal framework here, when Zencastr did that, they must have reported that to either a state or federal regulatory authority in order to protect me as the investor. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, to begin with, they would have to work through a crowdfunding platform, which is kind of an outsourced extension of the government to help facilitate these types of capital campaigns. And they have their own regulatory conformance requirements. Then as a company, you're going to be limited in what you say, when you say, where the documents are available for review. You'll have dollar caps on how much people can invest based on their income. And all of these are controlled through the platform or service that is helping with the capital campaign. Then as the issuer, the business raising the money, you will have reporting requirements where you're required to get information out on a regular basis to your investors So there is some degree of transparency continuing after the campaign is over. But altogether, it's way, way, way more simpler than the old public offering registration that we all grew up with. And despite the fact that it's still overly complicated and all these other complaints that I may have, it has opened up the market to people who otherwise were both legally or practically excluded, because no one would style an offer that's going to allow a $100 investment. There's too much pain in that, time and handling expense, as we call it, to do that unless you are actually targeting those people to become part of who you are, what you're doing.
Sure. Okay, and now it's starting to become clear. I've known very little about how these platforms are actually set up. So the crowdfunding platform that is able to offer these private security transactions to non-accredited investors, non-wealthy people, but based on the SEC definition, is the one that's checking all the regulatory boxes, making sure that the offering is compliant, and then the company that's raising the capital is just following the directions of the crowdsourcing platform, and that's who I gave my money to as an investor, right? So how do you navigate all this if you want to bypass the crowdfunding market and market your offering to private accredited investors? Is that a more onerous path these days? You can raise more money per person, but it probably has other requirements.
Actually, it has lesser requirements. The purpose of the not accredited investor status, which was accorded decades ago, was an assumption that if you're wealthy enough, you've got two choices. One, you can lose your investment and it's not going to make your life different. The other is that you can afford to hire someone to make these investment decisions for you as a registered investment advisor. And you can lean on them to get the proper advice to make the right decisions. So because of that, raising money from accredited investors is the easiest thing you can do if that will actually succeed in reaching your capital goals. And there are reasons why that may or may not work on any given offering. And it's one of the things that a company needs to look at when it develops its initial capital strategy, is trying to figure out who's most likely to invest, what their motivations are, what you got to give up in order to get that particular investment, and then looking at your different options. And if you can, as we described earlier, find a bank that will give you a loan at a good interest rate, that may be your better option than going to the equity markets.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So where do you see people go wrong with all this? You mentioned corporate espionage. Okay, I think you said it was an 8-beer story. It might be, I don't know if I can fit 8 beers here into the rest of the time we have left today. Where do people go wrong and make mistakes?
The biggest problem that entrepreneurs have is that they have limited experience or no experience in raising capital. Is they've seen certain television programs that'll go unnamed, or they have seen pitch sessions that are put on by the local angel investment group. And these both represent sources of capital, but they are so narrow and so specific that they quite often would exclude most campaigns by most businesses for all kinds of good reasons. If you have an angel investor, as an example, who wants a minimum rate of return of, say, 25% per year, well, certain small businesses aren't earning enough profit that they can give up enough of their future profits to meet that rate of return. It's out of reach. And at that point, no matter how many times they knock on that door, they're going to get rejected. And so the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make is talking to people who are never going to invest. Because every time they make a pitch, every time they put that time on the table and they get rejected, that's a complete waste of their time. And they don't have unlimited resources to continue knocking on doors until they're successful.
Right.
I've got more horror stories of good businesses, successful businesses that engaged in bad practices in raising capital until it diminished their sales, diminished their brand, and actually caused the businesses to fail. So figuring out who to talk to at the very start, making a fair assessment if they will or will not invest for a particular offer is the best thing you can do to get started, because that points you in the right direction at the right person to talk to.
Very good. Interesting. So what are you up to in your career at this point? How are you helping businesses navigate this stuff today, and where is your focus?
Yeah, so I'm currently adding more layers to my services and products. My bread and butter is typically consulting with someone on the design and implementation of a capital campaign, where we go from the strategy to a specific capital raise, targeting investors, crafting the offers, putting together the infrastructure, whatever you got to do. A lot of my campaigns are in the gap between $500,000 and $5 million, where they've already exhausted their friends and family or their own pocketbook, and now they're looking to grow to the next level up, and they don't have the resources to do that. And their lack of familiarization with how to raise capital has pointed them either nowhere or in the wrong direction. And our goal is to try to familiarize them with different options, help them select the best option, and then put together everything they need to do to complete that campaign. So I do consulting, but because a lot of people are still getting their feet wet in this area, I try to share as much information for free as I can. I was doing a podcast. I mentioned earlier I was going to switch over to a LinkedIn Live program here next month in January, where I'll be available once a week to talk about different issues. I just started a brand new newsletter called Instant Funding, which was not meant to be sarcastic, but it is a difficult goal to reach as far as instant funding goes. I've done it twice, so I know it can be done. And I'm now publishing that daily on LinkedIn, and anyone can subscribe for free. And all my podcasts are the Motivated Money podcast on both Apple and YouTube, which can be viewed for free. So these are things that I try to get information out there, let people get a better handle on what's going on. Then if they want to go deeper, then I'm creating some new products for an instant assessment of your fundability proposition called a fundability snapshot. We've created some short half-day workshops that can be extended into longer things, and just trying to give somebody a little bit of 101, 201, 301, 401 level courses, materials, before they maybe want to make the decision to jump off and start paying full tilt consultant fees.
Sure. So that's very cool to hear how you've built it out. So you've seen a lot of these transactions. You've been on board in various capacities. What has you continued to be motivated about it now?
That's a question I have to ask myself some mornings when I get started. That I generally view the world as a place that could be better than it is today. I don't get a lot of disagreement with that statement. And I think that innovation is one of the primary ways to make the world a better place. And I typically look to entrepreneurs to be the stewards of that innovation, to bring a new product or service to market. And if they're successful, then my life gets better. So I'm speaking from total self-interest here. And a year ago, I was working with an AI product, for example, but ChatGPT had not advanced to its current point. And now ChatGPT is a standard tool in my toolbox. It's made my life so much easier for cranking out large, complicated documents. And I'm happy that happened. I'm happy for OpenAI for bringing it to market and all the spinoffs. And the world's a better place, my opinion. Elon Musk still says that he thinks it's going to destroy the world. He could be right, but I'm going to bet on the other side of this for the moment. So these entrepreneurs need help going to market. And so if I can show them how to raise the capital they need to bring those products to market, then I feel I've done my part in making the world a better place. And therein lies my ultimate goal.
It's refreshing to hear you describe it in that manner, Karl. We work at our financial planning firm here predominantly with business owners, and part of the reason that we do that is I just personally really enjoy being a small cog in this entrepreneurial and capitalistic engine that we live in. And it's a really beautiful, there are a lot of criticisms of capitalism, right? And our broader country. I'm not going political or anything today, but it's a beautiful system in that you have somebody with an idea for a product or service that's not currently offered in the same manner in the marketplace. And they think that, hey, this would be valuable. It would add value to my target customer if I go out and create a company and offer this product or service out into the marketplace. And guess what? It's a huge risk. And if you take that risk and your hypothesis is correct, then people are naturally going to want whatever it is that you're offering because it's better than what was currently out there. And it adds value and makes their lives better. But it's a beautiful system because that person took a whole lot of risk. They didn't know definitively that the company was going to work. They just thought it would from, market research and target clienteles and all that. But if they're right, it's mutually beneficial. Their customers are better off and they're better off because of the economics of it. And when you wash, rinse, repeat that process over and over and over and over again, that's why we have all these cool things. Like we're sitting here talking through Zencastr and recording this podcast episode. None of this existed 10 years ago, right? And we're able to do all this cool stuff because there have been risk takers willing to go through that journey. And for me, and the way that you describe it too, Karl, is similar in that it's a pleasure to be a small part of that and help people along that journey in a way that benefits them long term. Because there's no better way to allocate resources, and that's I think been proven true over history, but I guess that's up for debate.
Yeah, no, capitalism has its limits, it has its flaws, but they kind of joke about what the U.S. Government system is terrible, but it's still better than anybody else's, and that's kind of the way I feel about capitalism. If they could come up with a better, more efficient marketplace that would do more to improve life for everybody, I'd sign up, but I haven't seen it. And I certainly dislike market controls and things that interfere with markets. We see these everywhere, particularly in government programs here in the United States. So it's not limited to foreign shores, where a whole market is almost destroyed by trying to do good in the wrong way. And if the market were allowed to address it properly, correctly, it would ultimately work itself out. That doesn't mean there isn't room for charity to fill the gaps, for the flaws in capitalism to be addressed, by charitable work, because I work with a variety of charities as well. But the heavy lifting is all done by capitalism.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing that I've wrestled with about on this topic is that corporations have just grown to be such behemoths, and maybe not to jump ahead too far, but with my thought process here, but corporations have grown to be tremendously powerful, and they own all the lobbies of the decision makers. And that's generally, I think, not a good thing. But perhaps the reason for that is we've just been lax in enforcing antitrust laws and generally more competitive marketplace practices. I'm just kind of spitballing here because I haven't fully hashed out this thought on my own. But the more competitive the marketplace, the smoother all these price discovery and marketplace dynamics work.
Yeah, the government typically impairs that by passing regulations which are supposed to be for the greater good, but quite often it's a lack of understanding about the unintended consequences of that regulation, or it's an intent to advance somebody's agenda regardless of the cost. And we're seeing a lot of that now, where we've got all kinds of laws on the books regarding the environment and housing, and I could go on and on and on. And you sit there and you look at the law, you goes, yes, that makes sense. I understand its good purpose. But let's talk about how it's impairing a small business from bringing a product or service to market, how it may be benefiting a large mega corporation to continue to sell the same old product and eke out more profits without adding value as they go along. And so there's a certain degree of chaos that you need in the marketplace to allow innovation to displace the old products and services over time. And all the different new product development theories and so forth, there's clearly an optimum where you want to maximize profits, but that's not necessarily to the benefit of your customers. So I like the companies who obsolete their own products by bringing out new and enhanced products and services, because they're both controlling their market by being better, not simply by being bigger.
Yeah, that's right. You explained that far more eloquently and succinctly than I was able to. Well, Karl, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on and going through your perspectives on raising capital from a business's and a business owner's point of view. We pointed everybody to your LinkedIn Live efforts. What is the name of your firm? What is your website that we can direct people to as well?
Sure. The name of the firm is Dakin Capital, and the website is www.dakincapital.com. So I've tried to keep that as simple as possible. I've had more cumbersome names in the past, and we keep shortening it to keep it sweet. And my name is Karl Dakin. First name spelled with a K, which is a Germanic origin, which confuses people. But if you look up Karl Dakin on Google and you get past the fact that I'm an old person who's been around a long time, and there's lots and lots of things on Google, then you could, if you look for me on LinkedIn, that's probably the quickest, easiest way to find me and see what I'm doing today.
Right on. Well, thanks again. We will link to all those items in the show notes. And again, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your wisdom.
Thank you, Grant. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I've learned along the way. And if your audience is interested in diving deep on any particular thing, whether it's funding related to acquisition and sale or succession or franchising or any number of things, there's things there that I'd be happy to talk about and get a little more into the weeds if somebody would like to do that.
Right on. Right on. Well, thank you, sir. I'll bid you a good rest of the day. And again, appreciate you coming on.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Grow Money Business, the podcast dedicated to helping business owners optimize income, pay less in tax, and invest prudently. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever you digest podcasts to ensure you don't miss out on future episodes and announcements, and feel free to submit questions to growmoneybusiness.com.